Welcome, my friend. The storm rages outside, but here, in the quiet of this story, I invite you to find peace. Let the sound of the rain and the distant thunder guide you as you drift into a place of calm. This story is my gift to you, a gentle companion for a night of restful sleep. Relax, let go of the day, and let the story carry you into dreams. The rain was relentless as it poured down in torrents, the windshield wipers struggling to keep up with the downpour. The road ahead was a blur, the headlights slicing through the sheets of rain like a knife. I was on another long haul, the kind of drive where you lose track of time, where the monotony of the road feels like a never-ending loop. But tonight felt different. The air was thick with unease. Something wasn't right. It started when I picked up my cargo at the warehouse. Nothing unusual, just a routine load. But there was something about it. The boxes seemed off. They were wrapped in plain brown paper, but they felt heavier than they should have. And there was a strange odor in the air. All right, we shall go on. Is that all? Okay, let's move on. Like iron. I tried to ignore it. Told myself I was just tired from the road. But as the hours dragged on, that uneasy feeling grew. It was a quiet night. Too quiet. The usual hum of the truck and the soft pitter-patter of the rain on the roof were the only sounds. But there was something else. Something beneath it all. A presence. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. As I neared an old, abandoned stretch of highway, the feeling intensified. The air grew colder, the mist heavier, as if the world outside the truck had disappeared entirely. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something or someone there. But there was nothing, just the endless road behind me. I reached for the radio to drown out the silence. But as I twisted the dial, it was all static. No signal, just that eerie, unsettling silence. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the unease clawing at my chest. The road ahead seemed to stretch on forever, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Then I heard it, a faint thump, like something heavy had shifted in the back of the truck. I glanced at the rearview mirror again. Yes, the thunder make me awake. Go on. Go on to the story, okay? This time I was sure I saw something moving in the darkness. I slammed on the brakes, the truck jerking to a stop on the wet road. My heart was racing. What was that? I quickly put the truck in park and climbed out, my boots splashing in the puddles as I made my way to the back. The rain was coming down harder now, and the night felt darker, colder, as if the world around me had shifted into some other place, some other time. I opened the truck's rear door and froze. The cargo, the boxes were no longer stacked neatly. They were scattered across the floor, some of them open, spilling their contents onto the wet floor. And that's when I saw it. Blood. A trail of dark red stained the floor, leading to one of the boxes. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I could feel it. The weight, the darkness, the horror that filled the air. Something was wrong. Something was terribly wrong. I stood frozen in the rain, the blood-stained cargo box lying open before me. The smell was sharp, metallic, a smell I knew all too well. My stomach churned as I stepped closer, the weight of the situation pressing down on me like 1,000 tons. I could feel the darkness closing in, the oppressive silence making my every move feel heavy, deliberate. I didn't want to look inside. I didn't want to see what was in that box. But I had to. My body moved against my will, and I felt as if I was stepping into something unnatural, something that I had no right to be involved in. With trembling hands, I reached for the lid of the box. My heart raced, the noise in my chest louder than the rain now. I lifted the lid slowly, and there, inside, was nothing. At least not at first. I blinked, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. It looked like just paper, thin sheets stacked neatly inside. But there was something underneath, something wrong. I moved the paper aside carefully, my fingers brushing against something cold and sticky. Then I saw it, a hand, a human hand, pale, lifeless, and covered in dark coagulated blood. I recoiled, stumbling backward, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't breathe. My head spun, and my hands felt numb. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I felt the walls of reality closing in on me, pressing in like a vice. The rain had stopped. The air around me was still, too still. I turned to run back to the cab, but then thump. The noise came again, louder this time. I froze, my heart racing, my body tense as I listened. I love the sound of thunder. Okay, go on. Thank you, let's move on. It was coming from inside the truck, the same sound I had heard before. I forced myself to move, to approach the rear door, but the blood felt like it was creeping up my spine, freezing me in place. I opened the door to the cab, but there was nothing, no sign of the movement. What was happening? I glanced over at the passenger seat, and my stomach dropped. The figure was sitting there, not a man, not a hitchhiker. The figure I had seen earlier in the rearview mirror. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I turned to run, but the doors slammed shut with a deafening crash. I felt a cold pressure against my chest as I struggled to breathe. The truck lurched forward. I was no longer driving it. It was driving me. You shouldn't have come here. The voice came from nowhere, and everywhere. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a shout. It was a feeling, a presence that filled the truck and the air around me. It felt like it was inside my skull, pressing against my mind, suffocating me. I struggled to turn the wheel, to get a grip on the truck, but it was useless. The road ahead was a blur, and I could feel the world around me warping, bending in on itself. The figure in the passenger seat was no longer just sitting there. It was leaning toward me, its form twisted, its face obscured by shadows. Its eyes glowed in the darkness. "You can't escape," it said, its voice a low, hollow echo. "You've always been here." I fought to keep control of the wheel, but it was slipping from my grip. The fog was getting thicker, pressing in on me from all sides, and the truck seemed to move faster, its engine growling, thrumming with power. I couldn't understand. The whispers came again, but this time they were clearer. "It's already too late." I could feel the sweat dripping down my face, my hand slick on the steering wheel, but it didn't matter. The truck was moving on its own, the engine roaring like a beast, faster and faster. As the road ahead grew darker, the world around me seemed to warp, twisting into something I didn't recognize. The figure beside me was still there, still watching me with those glowing eyes, its form shifting in the shadows, like it was part of the truck itself. "You're trapped," it whispered, its voice a low growl that vibrated in my chest. "You've always been part of this road. It's where you belong." I clenched my teeth, fighting against the terror rising in my chest. I had to focus. I had to stay in control. This was just a nightmare. It had to be. But the truck wasn't slowing down. It was speeding up, the road ahead turning into a blur, the lines on the asphalt dissolving into nothingness. The headlights cast harsh shadows, flickering in the fog, as the figure beside me leaned closer, its breath cold against my neck. "It's too late to turn back," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "You should have known better." I slammed my foot on the brake, but the pedal didn't respond. The truck didn't stop. I could feel the wheels spinning out of control, the road slipping beneath us like it was being consumed by the darkness. Panic surged through me as I struggled to keep the truck steady, but it was no use. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, pulling me toward the edge of the road. I could see the cliff ahead, its jagged edge disappearing into the black abyss below. The figure reached out, its hand cold as ice, resting on the dashboard. "You can't escape the fate you've sealed," it whispered, its voice now so close it made my skin crawl. "You brought this on yourself." I tried to scream, to fight back, but nothing came out. My throat felt tight, like I was choking on the very air around me. The truck was no longer mine. It was alive, pulling me forward into the unknown, into something darker than I could understand. The fog thickened, and I could feel the world spinning faster, the edges of reality blurring, until nothing felt real anymore. The truck was no longer on the road. It was floating, soaring through the blackness, carried by forces beyond my control. The figure beside me was still there, still watching. Okay, let's continue. Its eyes glowing brighter with each passing second. And then suddenly, the truck stopped. The engine cut out, the roar of it fading into an eerie silence. The truck came to a halt at the edge of a precipice, and for the first time, I could hear the sound of my own breath, shallow and ragged. I looked around, but there was nothing, nothing but darkness. The fog was gone, the road was gone, the world had vanished. The figure stood up, its form towering over me, casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the light. It reached out its hand, and for a moment, I thought it was going to touch me, to pull me into the abyss with it. "You're part of this now," it said, its voice a hiss in the stillness. "You can't escape your fate. You never could." I tried to push away, to move, but my body refused to obey. I was frozen, trapped in the truck, my mind screaming for release, but it was no use. The figure took another step toward me, its face still hidden in the shadows, but its presence filling the space around me. And then it spoke one last time, its voice a final, chilling whisper. "You're already dead." The world around me seemed to freeze, the darkness closing in, suffocating me. The figure in the passenger seat, it was standing now, its shadow stretching far beyond the limits of the truck. The air had grown cold, icy cold, and I could see my breath misting in the thick silence. The sound of my heart pounding in my chest was the only thing I could hear now, and the whispers in my mind. The same voice, louder than ever, telling me I couldn't escape. "You're already dead." The words echoed in my head, reverberating off the walls of my skull. I tried to run, but my body wouldn't respond. The truck, the space around me, felt like it was closing in, like I was being sucked into a vortex of endless black. I could see the figure's face now, but it wasn't just a face. It was the reflection of me, distorted and twisted, with empty, hollow eyes that stared back at me in a way that made my skin crawl. The smile it wore was not my own, too wide, too twisted, like it had been carved into its face. "No, no, no," I gasped, trying to push myself away from the figure, my hand slipping on the steering wheel. The truck was swaying, pulling me, inching toward the edge of the cliff. "You're mine now," the figure whispered again, its voice too close, too real. "There's no escape." There never was. I could feel it now, the weight of the truck, the weight of the darkness, pulling me down, dragging me deeper into the void. The road, the fog, the storm, they were all gone. Everything around me had melted away, leaving only me and this thing, this reflection of myself. I tried to scream, but the sound was lost in the oppressive silence, swallowed up by the very air itself. I felt the presence of the figure growing closer, its cold, invisible fingers pressing against my chest. It wasn't touching me physically. It was inside me, squeezing the life out of me, turning my thoughts into nothing but endless echoes of the same words. "You're already dead." It wasn't just the truck anymore. It wasn't just the road. The world itself was falling apart, collapsing under the weight of the figure's words. The earth trembled beneath me. The truck shook violently as if it were being pulled into the abyss, the ground below opening up like a mouth ready to swallow me whole. And then suddenly, everything stopped. The shaking ceased. The truck stilled. The air, once suffocating, now felt empty. There was nothing left. No figure, no truck, no road. I was floating, but not in space. It wasn't like a weightless sensation. It was as if I had been erased from the world entirely. The blackness around me was complete. But I could still feel it, the pressure of the figure's presence, even though it was gone. And in the silence, I understood. I had never truly been on the road. I had never truly been alive. This was my final destination. The truck, the road, the rain, they had all been part of this endless loop. The moment I picked up that blood-stained cargo, I had stepped into a place where there was no way out. A place where you never escape, where you are always caught in your own fate. I wasn't alive. I wasn't dead. I was lost. The voice whispered again, distant, but clearer than ever. "You belong to the road. Forever." And then everything went dark. Sometimes we drive so far into the unknown, we forget where we started. And by the time we realize, it's too late to turn back.